We're going to do final checks today for our clock before we cut it out. So this video is just about the clock. To do the clock, we're going to use the black CNC router. That's called the Swift IQ from Laguna. If you're watching this video and you're going to be cutting out a sign, we're going to be using the CNC Shark for that video. But I want to go over all the different possibilities that you could go on just to do a final check before we cut it out. So please watch this video before I use the CNC router, especially if I'm not there, to make sure that all this stuff is going to work out. The first check that we want to do is I want you to click on this button right here. This is the job setup button. So when I click on this, I can look through the left side of the screen and I can see the job size. So we're doing a 12 by 12 rectangle. That's a 1/2 inch thick. The Z0 position needs to be material surface. The XY or the start position needs to be the center. So if all that stuff is good, say okay. Now let's say I had this off. I'm going to click over here. I'm going to purposely do it wrong. And now it says, do you want me to recalculate? And this thing will automatically recalculate everything. So you don't have to stress out about it. So I'm going to go back here and undo what I just did. We want this to be centered. And then, okay. Now to bring everything back to the center. Super important that that thing is coming off the center of your clock. Otherwise, it's not going to cut it out right on the board that's on the CNC router. In fact, you'll probably hit the clamp as that's going around. Okay, next step. I'm going to move my picture over here. Is we're going to go through each of these tool paths. So these tool paths may be selected, they may not be. So I'm going to look at my first tool path in numbers, and you can tell from this icon right here that this is a pocket tool path. A pocket tool path is going to use a bit, and we're going to have square edges on the number. So right around the 1 and the 2, it's going to be square. So this is going to look very similar to the clock that's hanging up by the door. All of those numbers have a pocket tool path. I want to make sure that I have a cut depth of 1/8 of an inch, 0.125, and the tool that I'm using is the 1/8 inch end mill. I'm going to double check this too, that the number that the tool is in is tool number 1. And I'll say okay. Don't worry about all those other settings. They'll be fine. Edit passes. If it's different than 1, make sure it says 1. We can do 1 pass with an 1/8 inch bit. Offset climb, that's fine. Ramp plunge moves to 1 inch. And then name it. And I'm going to change the name on this to say, I'm going to put my initials in there, KS125. And you'll see why we do that when we get to the router. But I'm going to make the tool path have the tool that I'm actually using to cut it, the name of it in there, and I'm putting KS, my initials, and what tool I'm using so I don't mess that up when I get to the router. Because you'll see when we get to the router, I actually have to put this bit inside the router. So I'll say calculate. We're good. If I want to preview the visible tool path, I can do that, and I can see I've got these nice square edges on here. Now I'm going to go back to the 2D view, close this, and the circle cutout. Now the order matters. The circle needs to be the last thing that we cut out. So I'm actually going to drag my circle cutout to the very end, and we'll come back to this in a second. Now this YZ here, this was too small. Some of you will get the notification that when you try to calculate something, it says that the geometry is not right, or the actual router bit won't fit in the hole. Remember, we're using a router bit that has thickness, and on this YZ writing here, some of those letters got too small. The router bit couldn't fit in there. So I've switched to a profile tool path. So if I double click on this, we'll see the profile tool path. We're going to use a V-bit, a 1/16 of an inch. The V-bit looks like this. It doesn't matter which one of these you use. If we were cutting really deep, it would, but just make sure it's in tool number 1. Say select, and we want to have them, there'll be 1 pass. The machine vector should be right on top of it. We don't need to add any tabs or add any ramps. And we're going to name this KS V-bit. Again, I want to know when I load the tool path on that black router, which tool I'm using to load. So I'm naming it V-bit with my initials, and I'm going to say calculate. I can preview the visible tool path if I want to see what that's going to look like. And as we talked about in the previous video, we can make that deeper or shallower if we want more. And you can use either the V-bit or that 1/8 inch bit or a 1/4 inch bit. Doesn't matter to me. Now, the last thing that we need to do, we need to make sure that this is last, is we want that circle cut to be down here. So I'm going to look at that circle cut. I don't want to cut all the way through because I want to be able to put the clamps on this 12-inch piece and hold it down and not have anything come out. So our stuff is half an inch thick, 0.5. We're going to cut it to 0.45, so there's just a little bit left. Then we just run it upside down to the time saver, which we won't do until I get back. If you're doing this when I'm gone, we're only going to be using these routers. Tool is the 1/4 inch end mill. Select it if it's not up here. I'll move this so you can see it, but 1/4 inch end mill. Make sure it's in tool number 1. Say select. Now I want you to do this in 3 passes because we're cutting all the way through the board. We want to make sure it's 3 passes. Now inside, outside is up to you. So if I cut on the inside, I just have to make sure that my numbers aren't so close to the edge that the router bit can't pass in there. Inside's kind of safe. So if we accidentally mismeasure the middle of the board, it's not a huge problem. Add ramps of 1 inch. That means the bit doesn't go straight down. It goes in at an angle. And then we're going to call this KS25 because we're using the 1/4 inch bit and say calculate. Preview visible toolpath. We can see when we orbit that this thing just about goes through, but it doesn't quite. So if you guys are good with all of that, now what you can do is we'll close this, is you're actually going to output this to a flash drive. So I'm going to plug the flash drive in. And there's flash drives that should be plugged into the routers right now. When I plug that in, this pops up. I'm going to just close this for now. So this is, I would definitely go File, Save As, and save this on your Google Drive if you want to. That way we don't lose this. I can save this onto my Google Drive, my drive. I have so many folders. We're going to find the Woods 1 folder. I'm going to call this clock. And I'll put it in my CNC. I'll just put it in here, that's fine. Okay, so now that file's saved. Now what you're actually going to do though is output the G code. So you're going to come here and you're going to use this save tool path. Now, if I click them all, you see we're going to get some options here. Visible tool paths to multiple files. So make sure they're all selected and these are all have the right name. And we're going to save them. The post processor is Laguna IQ. If you don't have this saying Laguna IQ, use a different computer. It's kind of a process to get that on there. But visible toolpaths to multiple files. That's what we want to do. And we're going to hit Save Toolpath. And we're going to find the USB drive. And we'll see how this does. I'm not sure if it'll actually save all 3 of them. But the KS125, let's start there. Hit Save. And then I'm going to go look at that flash drive and see if that's on there. Where did that flash drive go? There we go. There. So it changed them. So it says KS125, KS125. So I think what we would do then is we're just going to rename these and get rid of that first KS125 so we can see what in the world. So I'm clicking on them and hitting F2. And you'll see when you get to the black CNC router why we want, there's only so many characters that are visible when we try to run the file that I want to get rid of all the stuff in the beginning of them. So now on my flash drive are these files, and that's perfect. So that is where you'll take that flash drive and you're going to bring that right over to the CNC router. You'll need to find the center of your board, but there'll be another video that we pick up at the CNC router. Please lean on your classmates if you have any questions. Thanks. Good luck.